So just to give you the context from where we left off last time, so we had started value, money, and price, and we discussed how measuring value is a problem fundamentally, right? So because value being subjective, there is no easy way that two people can arrive at a proportionate amount of the exchange of goods and services that they're engaging in. So as simple as two people becomes a problem when you introduce a third person. There are three goods and services that you now have to uh, do what's called a price ratio or price or exchange ratios. So you have to do an exchange ratio for how much is A willing to give to B for the exchange of the services that they are giving. So I think it's if it's intuitive that it becomes a problem as soon as you introduce a third person. But even for two people, you can understand that there is no way to measure value. Even if there is a way for two people to engage in a trade, there is no way for to understand a fair value of exchange. And how money solves that problem is that it allows for a price signal. And how that happens is that people engage in trade organically by two people acting for their own subjective value. And over time, money acts as an intermediary for the whole economy. And there's a natural signal for how all trade to happen by using that one price signal. So yeah, we had, if just to recall, we had discussed how money is a commonly used medium of exchange, and something that was not money before cannot become money until there is some utility to it, or it's accepted by the market participants for some reason. And over time, because of its properties, it can become the commonly used medium of exchange. And we had I'll just read the last paragraph where we had left off so that I can also just set the context again from the book. Yeah, I'll read from here. So, yeah, we had, if you remember, we had discussed briefly about how currently there is the decree of fiat tender, fiat currency as a tender, legal tender on all the market participants. And this book conceptualizes that money can never be a top down decree, because until market participants are already valuing something as money, nobody will accept money. So nobody will accept anything which is not money already as a form of payment or medium of exchange. So we had discussed that in the last session, that how CBDCs or already fiat currencies are in a way antithesis to that, and we got into a debate about how that's actually not true, that it's not market participants willingly engaging in fiat currency as trade, even though most people, just because of the network effects of fiat currency, do not think of it that way. But because you are forced to pay your taxes and legal tender in fiat currency, you are forced to use them even if you don't want to. So I'll just read from here the last para that we had read in the last session. A decree does not create a money, it creates only an obligation, which is limited by the extent of its enforcement. However, it is fully conceivable that a government can, bit by bit, take over and monopolize an already existing money, which we have seen happen. Most currencies today are government monopolies, and that is not how money was invented or accepted as a medium of exchange. It is only how it ended up. The economic function of money cannot simply be created from the top down. So I think if all of us are active on Bitcoin Twitters, there are some narratives that fiat is only a 50-year-old experiment, and some people say that it's a 100-year-old experiment because it started with the Federal Reserve, and some people say it's a 250-year-old experiment or something on the order of more than 250, somewhere between 250 to 300 years, because it started with Bank of England as being the first central bank. In my opinion, I don't have a strong opinion on this, but I think we have never been on a gold standard, at least for a long enough time frame, to consider gold as a medium of exchange. I alluded to this in the previous session, that gold has always failed to be a medium of exchange. It's the reason that we are living on a fiat standard. Otherwise, gold did serve the purpose of store of value to a certain extent successfully. So currently, government monopolizes money, but it's through the tender of legal fiat. And yeah, even though that was not money how money was invented, but in my opinion, money was always that way, because we are always monetized the promises by the government and never really had a most common say medium of exchange, something which is organically emerged in the economy. Some people say that gold has said that, but in my humble opinion, I don't know, or at least in my limited understanding of history, gold, in my opinion, was not ever a medium of exchange, at least for a large part of history. So it might have it might have been successful in certain parts of history, but as a global economy, we have never had gold standard. Yeah. If anybody has insights, I think I've seriously recently started reading Broken Money as well. So I'm not somebody who can opine on monetary history a lot. It's something to think about that if we had anything other than Bitcoin, then it would have been successful. But it's because we have fiat currency that we need Bitcoin because there are so many reasons to it. But we needed a common medium of exchange which is neutral. And other than Bitcoin, we've never had an option. So I'll read from here now. People choose to exchange goods for their own benefit, which means voluntary exchange must be for parties' mutual benefit. Both expect to become better off or they wouldn't choose to engage. An obligation to accept something that is not directly valuable to them, such as an imposed currency not yet accepted as money, would lessen people's willingness to trade. So right. So even if we're living on a fiat currency, if people are allowed to settle trade in and settle contracts in different monies, then it would not have been that big of a deal, right? Because it's like central banks are running a business of printing fiat currency, and if they could be theoretically a free market participant, but that's not the case, right? So it's an imposed currency more than just a the most saleable medium of exchange, the most saleable good or the medium of exchange. So, right. So even if we are living on a fiat currency standard, and I'm getting into very controversial territory, so I'm not an economic expert, but this is just somebody who has been learning about Bitcoin in the last 2 years, sharing his thoughts. That if somebody can technically, if you're following what's happening in Argentina, I'm following it a little bit. That Millet recently allowed to settle contracts in not just Bitcoin but also gold and any commodity. So it's he's not demonetizing peso, the national currency of Argentina, but it's allowing market participants to settle contracts in anything that they consider money. So which is a good step because people are at least engaging in free market practice now, even if they're not on the Bitcoin standard. Because for the purpose of Austrian economics, if market participants are free to act and express value by their action, then it's a free market, and we can study it without the interference of regulations and external factors. But yeah, as we have it in most countries in US, India, and yeah, other than El Salvador and Argentina, you do not have the option to settle legal contracts in anything other than the legal currency of that country. After all, if you were compelled to, right, I was here. Yeah, an obligation to accept something that is not directly valuable to them, such as an imposed currency, not yet accepted as money, would lessen people's willingness to trade. After all, if you were compelled to accept rocks in payment for your belongings, then you probably would refrain from offering them up for sale. Even if I offered you a ton of rocks, you would not exchange them for your house or car. Why trade a valued good for something you don't want? So even if you were required to pay your taxes using rocks, you would limit your trade for rocks to fulfill that duty, but not more. The market for exchanging goods for rock would be very limited. So yeah, so it's the same idea that most people who understand economics and store of value thesis of any store of value, they understand that fiat currency is the worst store of value. So you're better off accumulating. Yeah, it's I don't know if it's a technically correct argument that fiat currency is the worst store of value, but you are better off you using anything else which has been a store of value recognized than fiat currency. And yeah, so it's because of that that it limits the market to a large extent because most people do not have access to most assets, and because of that they are forced to use fiat currency as their store of value, and that in itself limits the extent to which trade is possible. Such exchanges would happen by choice only if payment offered were actual money. In a society where there is no money, people not only lack trust in money's purchasing power, they have no understanding of the concept itself. Imagine offering a stack of dollar bills or gold coin to a person from the Stone Age in exchange for their axe or food. So we'll start with emergence of money. Just a quick pause if somebody wants to share any thoughts. I'll start from here. The emergence of money. Money is an economic concept. Dollar bills aren't money in themselves, but money can exist in the form of dollar bills. However, those bills are money only because and for as long as they are accepted as such. This becomes obvious when we travel to other countries because what is money in one country may not be accepted as money in another. You cannot use Swedish kroner for payment in Austria or the United States, even though everyone in Sweden accepts them as money. Hmm. So we know very little about the historical origins of money, but the concept is clear. The economist Karl Menger shows how a barter economy can transition into a money economy. Menger's explanation requires no central planner or decree. Money emerges. This is important because it provides insight into the meaning and role of money as an economic concept. So if I mean there are a lot of opinions about the historical origins of money. Some say that it's older than writing itself because money is just a ledger, and you can call social contract as a ledger as well. And how Karl Menger, the father of Austrian economics, posits it is that barter economy transitions into money economy because money emerges. It's an expression of which good in the economy is the most saleable good, and it needs to have certain properties for it to be that. But it is always an emergent property. There is no central planner or decree that tells you that this will be money from today. And this is important because it provides insight into the meaning and role of money as an economic concept. In a barter economy, people trade goods for goods. This economy suffers from obvious limitations because each exchange requires that both parties get something they want in a quantity they want without using anything we call money. In other words, someone who offers eggs for sales and wishes to buy butter needs to find someone who is selling butter and wants egg in exchange. This greatly limits the number of potential trading partners. Because goods differ in durability and size, barter economies could not develop into productive economies with division of labor. Consider a boat builder who wants to sell his newly designed speedboat. Even if even if he would not want even if he would want eggs, he would hardly accept thousands of eggs in exchange. They would go bad and be useless in a short period of time. So he would need to find someone offering the exact bundle of goods that he wants and is willing to sell for the boat. The parties also need to agree on the rates, how many eggs for the boats. So yeah, pretty self-explanatory that what I highlighted, we discussed in the previous session as well, that money allows you to not only trade with more partners because money is the most saleable good, but also that it becomes a problem even if you have the correct trade partner that you want to trade a certain good with. There is no way for you to know which amount, and even if you know the which amount, it greatly limits the potential for trade because nobody's trading 1000x for a speedboat. Uh, People exchange goods to become better off. That is, they trade for value. Menger noted that people will seek any number of ways to get around the limitations of barter. If the dairy farmer is not willing to accept my eggs for butter, but I know he will accept bread, then I can approach the baker to exchange eggs for bread. And if the baker agrees, I can then exchange the bread for butter. In other words, I exchange eggs for bread, not because I want bread, but because I want to use the bread to obtain butter. My first exchange facilitates the second, from which I benefit directly. So you can see that bread here is being used as the intermediary for trading what you actually want. So you have eggs, you want butter, but the person who's giving you the butter is not willing to accept eggs, but they are willing to accept bread. So you have to first find someone who can exchange your eggs for bread. And bread here is the facilitator of trade. So money does that now. We all understand that money is doing that. So money is already the intermediary in economy. And its purpose is to solve the problem of trade through multiple exchanges. So if you're wanting to trade with somebody only for the purpose of being able to trade with somebody, you're going to have to find what's called the solution to double coincidence of wants problem, that they want exactly what you are offering to sell them, so that you can get what somebody else now wants. So it becomes very difficult even with just three people, and money solves that by being a neutral common good that everybody agrees is what they want, or they are willing to offer their goods and services the most number of times. If I wanted berries, for example, I would have to go through the same procedure if the person offering berries does not want my eggs but would accept something else. I would sell my eggs for that something else in order to exchange it for berries. Even though the eggs work in some cases, they won't work in all. But let's say some of them accept the same different good in exchange for bread. Knowing this, I could exchange my eggs for bread simply because I believe the bread will be more useful when I go on my next grocery run. So it's highlighting the same idea that you're trying to find the good which allows you to be to be more useful when you're trying to engage in trade with other people. In Menger's terms, I sell my eggs to acquire a more saleable good for the purpose of using it in exchange. To me, it serves only the indirect purpose of facilitating the actual exchanges. Thus, it makes sense for me to acquire bread even if I don't fancy it and even if I am allergic to it. As people exchange their products for more saleable goods, the more saleable goods become more sought after because they can be used to buy many goods. And as more people realize how useful these goods are as facilitators of exchange, more people sell their own goods, I, my eggs, the dairy farmer, her butter, etc., for those more saleable goods, eventually by people's actions and but not by their design. One or a few goods emerged as commonly used media of exchange, monies. They are valued primarily as media of exchange, not for being goods in themselves. Yep. And Bitcoin is the perfection of that because Bitcoin never needed to be anything else. It was always intended to be facilitator of trade. And it's so the one property in money which uh, I think it's highlighted by the word uh, portability, but the better description of it is given in broken money, at least in my opinion. It's that it needs to pack the most value in as minimum size and weight as possible for it to be portable, right? So that it's easy for you to trade it for coffee and also trade it for a house. And Bitcoin does that perfectly because it packs a potentially unlimited value in as little as size as is possible. Um, it cannot get any better than that. The importance of money. Yep, let's start here. In a money economy, we use money to pay for goods and can easily compare prices because they are all expressed in the same unit, a currency. But as we've seen in previous chapters, prices are really exchange ratios. Money serves as an intermediary that facilitates trade, that elevates us above the limitations of barter trade. Yep. So yeah, it's the same unit or the measurement stick which allows us to measure values of everything else, and that gives price to everything else, and so that it allows us to know which trade requires which service or how much, etc. The existence of money uncouples people's buying and selling in terms of goods. It makes universal purchasing power of the exchange value of goods. So yeah, this is a pretty interesting term. I think it's used in economics a lot. Money makes universal purchasing power of the exchange value of goods. It's like whenever you have a good or service to offer in the economy, whatever is the exchange value of that, whatever somebody is willing to use that and give you badly enough that they want to give you money for it, then that's the exchange value of that. And money makes it universal because now you're able to offer it to somebody and you can acquire money using that, and now you have the purchasing power universal, right? Because you can use money to buy anything in the economy. In other words, I can sell my goods or services to one person, but use the purchasing power gained in return as money to buy goods or services from someone else. This seems obvious, but because we are used to it, however, the implications are enormous. Right. So any option, other option to compare it to is barter trade, because if you've seen one of those graphs like fiat currency, if it's one good at one thing, it's being a medium of exchange because it sucks as being store of value. It's a good medium of exchange in the modern century that you can send. I mean, it sucks as international payments, but it does a good job at least in the local market that you're using it. And yeah, so it's obvious now because I mean, for all history, recorded history, there's no barter economy anytime any in the recent history. And but yeah, it's one thing to think about that how profound the implications are, because it allows you to produce something which you might not even consider very useful to yourself, but because you are able to offer it to somebody in exchange for money, you open the uh, options for one individual to produce goods and services which wouldn't have been possible without money. Under barter trade, employment would be possible only where an employer can offer the specific goods an employee will accept as payment. Imagine that your employer is paid for labor not in money, but instead in specific items, clothing, hygiene products, books, travel furniture, etc. It is easy to see that finding an employer who offers the most desirable bundle of goods would be almost impossible. It would likely mean that you would need to accept a bundle that is far from perfect to gain employment. You could do much better if you receive the exchange value of those goods instead, the purchasing power. and use it to buy the goods you prefer. So yeah, pretty self-explanatory that there's a reason that most people, because most people are different and they will prefer their own purchasing choices, then any person will always prefer receiving money as compensation than anything that any potential employer can ever offer. Mm. Money is therefore much more than a convenience. Yeah, just highlighting one point, I think the fiat system has incentivized for people to offer dearness allowance and tax benefits and insurance benefits. But all of us understand the problem with it because it's colluded between those industries that if you are receiving compensation just in form of money, it can become potentially very expensive for you to fund your health expenses. But in a free market, we know that wouldn't be true. You would more people will be incentivized to receive directly money so that they can make choice which insurance company they want to take the service of instead of being forced to receive payment in certain other rewards or certain allowances instead of receiving money for your labor. Money is therefore much more than a convenience. It is necessary for exchanges to take place and for the advanced specialized production processes we take for granted in the modern economy. Large scale production, supply chains, and specialization are made possible because money uncouples our efforts as both buyers and sellers. Due to the uncoupling, we can also specialize in what we do well rather than produce only what we ourselves want to consume. Consequently, we can focus our production efforts on where we make the biggest difference, where we create most value for society. Without money, we would not be nearly as productive. The uncoupling also means that we can use our acquired purchasing power, what we are paid for producing, on what we find most valuable. Money makes it possible for us to pursue wants that would never be within reach with barter. The consequence of having and using money means not only greatly improved production, but also that we can pursue more valuable consumption. Former facilitates and increases the opportunities for the latter, and the more value we produce, the more purchasing power we are paid in return. Yep. So yeah, it's allows you to not only produce things which might not necessarily be for your consumption because you are empowered by money to exchange it with anybody who finds it valuable in exchange for the most saleable good in the economy, which is money. But because you have money, you are opened up to potential trades which were never possible. So you are not only able to produce. I mean, as an economy, we are able to incentivize individuals to produce valuable goods, even though they are not for their consumption, but for those individuals to have consumable goods and services which they could have never have access to without money. So yeah, I mean, the more number of Bitcoiners we have, the more potential, not just in terms of NGU and just purchasing power increasing, but also the potential for engaging in trades which fiat currency have never allowed. So uh, I think I've shared this with Mango. Maybe that Giovanni, the who started the power law study in Bitcoin. There's a lot of controversy. I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on whether it's genuine or not. But it's fascinating because of also the context in which he started it. There's a newsletter or a thread on Reddit, which is on transhumanism. And Giovanni's context was that he started going into Bitcoin because a lot of transhuman researchers do not receive the adequate funding or do not because they're not sometimes they're not able to access traditional forms of capital raising and seed investments and VCs and angel investors. Then Bitcoin allows them to open themselves up to the entire world to receive investments and start their bootstrap their projects. So it's interesting that Bitcoin currently, how it is, we cannot possibly imagine what it can allow us to do because freedom money allows two participants to engage in a trade without can, anybody getting in their way. So the potential for human exploration and exchange and trade has opened up to an extent which can never be put back in the box. So we don't know what the implications of that are, but yeah, fascinating to think what it can lead to. Because all actors in a money economy can pursue those goods they value most and can produce those goods that others highly value, there is more value overall. We are much better off in a money economy than in a barter economy. So pretty obvious, and all of these concepts, especially in this chapter, are pretty intuitive. If you talk to your mom or if you talk to your friend, these are pretty obvious to them. But I still think it's something to at least sit down with and think about because the profoundness of what money allows is not obvious to a lot of people. And I think even if they do not understand Bitcoin, they at least do understand all of these concepts intuitively, but they do not actively think about. And somewhere society misses out on that. I mean, all of us here understand it's not new information to anybody here, but we realize the mandate of central banks currently, and why are they able to operate as as big thieves as they are, because their mandate is full employment and stable prices. And I recently read about how stable prices to them, even in theory, mean 2% inflation every year. I mean, it's I knew this, but I did not know that it's mandated for them to have stable prices. But the first bit, full employment, a lot of people are actively supporting that idea. I believe that's the reason that central banks are esteemed organizations. Because if you remember, if some, I can't see how many people are in the session right now, but if you were part of the Lightning Network session, I discussed this briefly that most people are aware of the issues with big tech and privacy, but they don't see central banks. And I received a message from Jatin. Yeah, no worries, Jatin, if you can hear, if you're there. But yeah. So anyway, so yeah, I was just highlighting how central banks and how they're operating currently. I believe it's a combination of both force and psychology, and psychological work needs to be done by people themselves. We can't force individuals to suddenly stop valuing central banks at all. Bitcoiners would love that, but people are doing that because they don't realize the profoundness of what money does and what freedom money can do for human society. Yeah, so a quick pause. We're halfway through the session. We'll start with money prices.
Hey Shyam, I mean, I apologies I joined late. So before moving on to the next session, is it possible for you to summarize what we went through, like in 30 to 40 seconds, the gist of it,
Right,
so that I
right.
can, get,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So I just quickly just also glide over. So if you remember, we left off in the last session discussing top-down decree of money, and we had a small debate about. First, I posited that CBDCs or even fiat currencies are not always top-down, because most people are opting in. Most people do not see a problem with fiat currencies. But you rightly pointed out that we are entitled, or we are obligated to pay our taxes and legal tender and services that we are forced to receive from the government in fiat currency. So it is still a top down decree that we are forced. So we briefly discussed just that context, and after that we went over the importance of money. So if you were here in the last 2 to 3 minutes, then what I said was that all of these ideas are obvious, especially to people who understand Bitcoin and have been studying economics. But the idea is very simple, that money is an intermediary, because if A wants to trade with B, but B does not have the exact thing that A wants, then A will have to find somebody called C to get the thing that B wants, that C has to offer. So even if it's three people, it quickly becomes a problem. It's called what's known as double coincidence of wants. That barter requires that two people have exactly what the other person is looking for, and the exact same quantity that they're looking for. So it limits the potential of trade hugely. And it's also a problem that somebody who is a boat maker who wants eggs and somebody who has eggs wants a boat, they still can't engage in trade, because first they cannot, it's not easy for them to come arrive at a number that how many eggs for a boat. And even if they do, if it's 1,000 eggs for a boat, it's not a realistic trade. So this is how barter economy was always inefficient, and a money economy solves that problem by having one saleable good or medium of exchange. And yeah, so we briefly also discussed that Carl Menger talks about that origin of money has always been mysterious or never quite recorded, because some people say it goes back as far as before writing, because humans engage in social contract by exchanging favors. So somebody would say that that's a ledger and that's money. So it's not very obvious that when did money start, but we know that every money which has been used in history has emerged. That there was nothing was money from the first time it was used as money, because somebody exchanged it either for aesthetic value or for experimental value, and it only became money because it had certain properties, and over time people used it, and it became a saleable good, more saleable good, because they started using it more and more. And it opened the potential for trade, and it also opened up potential for production, because some person who is now empowered to produce something that he does not like or does not want to consume, but he's very good at it. Now he can do that because he can exchange that with somebody for money, and money allows him to get the things that he wants. And the one example of that was an employer who will give you everything which are valuable, but every person generally would always prefer receiving money because everybody is different. They have subjective values. And yeah, we briefly glided over some anecdotes. I just share one of them that currently in the fiat system, you are forced to receive certain allowances or certain tax benefits, which might not always be actually your choice. And it's become a thing where a lot of compensation in a lot of industries, at least, not always, they employees are not able to receive adequate compensation or what they will prefer. And in a free market, people will always prefer money. They will always want to trade their labor for the or for the market price and not receive some allowances because they would rather make that choice themselves. But yeah, so yeah, this is the overall context. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Right, yeah. One idea was also the uncoupling that I just alluded to. That uncoupling of buyer. The sorry, I'll just what's the word? Forgetting the term. Mm, yeah, I think, yeah, this is the line itself. The uncoupling also means that we use our acquired purchasing power, what we are paid for producing, on what we find most valuable. The uncoupling is between what you produce and what you consume, because money allows you to engage in trade with more potential partners. Then you can not only produce things which you are good at, even though you don't like them, but now you have access to more goods and services because otherwise you were engaged only in trade with the limited production capabilities that you had or your local economy had. But when you have money and other people are also able to produce things that they are good at and they might not necessarily consume, you have access to them. So I think these ideas are pretty fundamental to economics, and most people understand it. I just summarized it by saying that these ideas, I believe, are still important to at least crunch in your own head and just sit with them, because I just said that the central bank problem is like an elephant in the room that everybody knows about, but nobody sees a problem with. I think it's because most people don't realize the value of freedom money, how it can allow us to engage in trade uh, in 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 a much more efficient way. So, I mean, the context of this chapter has been that international market and currency markets are barter markets. So it's like in 2024, we are living in a barter economy still internationally. So the implications of it, it's not obvious to a lot of people, but I think 50 years from now, it will look pretty obvious how inefficient just the idea of multiple currencies was. Start with money prices. And yeah, feel free to ask questions or share any thoughts. Money makes prices easy to compare rather than expressing prices as ratios where each good is priced in terms of all other goods, they are expressed in money. In a barter economy, my buying bread with eggs in order to buy butter requires that three parties establish exchange ratios. I might be able to exchange a dozen eggs for three slices of bread from the baker. In this transaction, the price of one slice of bread is four eggs, and the price of one egg is a quarter slice of bread. I can then use the bread to purchase a pound of butter for two slices of bread, making the bread price of butter two slices per pound and the butter price of bread half a pound per slice. I am party to both transaction and can infer that the price of 1 pound of butter is 8 eggs. That is a simplification because the dairy farmer does not accept eggs in exchange. The problem is that prices of all goods here are expressed as ratio of all other goods. So, for the purpose of Austrian economics, we understand that price of anything is just determined by the value that both the market participants, in both individuals in the market, engage in, and in their subjective assessment are better off. So there is no one way of getting a price. There is no outside way of getting to a price other than people engaging in trade. But what money allows us is having one common denominator, because otherwise you're stuck with the problem of valuing eggs in butter and then butter in bread. So yeah, if somebody is I mean, wanting to understand this, it obviously makes sense, but it quickly becomes a tongue twister almost, that it becomes a problem of ratio, that you're trying to get to the price of butter in eggs, even though the person you're giving the eggs to is not actually receiving the eggs. And so this is the problem. It just goes to highlight the problem with barter, which are again obvious, but it goes to show you that the value of one common denominator is the powerful and the needed idea. If, for example, the dairy farmer would also accept 8 cups of berries for a pound of butter, then the price of 1 pound of butter would be either 2 slices of bread or 8 cups of berries. Such ratios, prices in kind, could be established for all combinations of goods in any possible exchange. But how can we compare them? Without a common denominator, these prices are all unique exchange ratios that is difficult to keep straight or make sense of. Let us assume that bread emerges as money in the example above. This means that bread, serving as the medium of exchange, becomes one side of virtually every transaction. In other words, the prices of all goods can be expressed in terms of bread because they are traded for bread. So I would sell my eggs for bread and use bread to buy butter and berries. As bread is the common denominator, I can easily compare prices and buy the good that will best satisfy my wants. Now, because bread is money, all sellers of goods are likely to accept it as payment because they want the purchasing power, not the bread itself. If a pound of butter costs 2 slices of bread and a slice of bread buys 2 cups of berries, then it is easy for me to compare prices. The 3 slices of bread that I was paid for my dozen eggs can buy either 1.5 pounds of butter, 6 cups of berries, or some other combination. All I need to do now is determine which option I value more highly. I can easily calculate how to get most value for each slice of bread. So replace this with money or Bitcoin, it makes perfect sense that when you start using bread to measure the value of everything else, then you arrive at signals for how you want to act, right? Because you can arrive at what's the price of eggs measured in bread, what's the price of berries measured in bread, what's the price of butter measured in bread. So it allows you to compare now that do you want eggs, do you want berries, do you want butter, and at what cost, right? So it's like you want a combination of them, but you can now arrive at a much better understanding of what a combination of that you want. So it's a very simple idea of common denominator, or the idea of having common metric. So one famous quote, I think I've quoted it before. It's not mine, of course, but it's a very simple idea to just take away. It's that scientific temperament begins when humans start asking how much after how. It's like when you start, how is the process of understanding a mechanism, and when you arrive at how much, you already have a metric, or you have a standard unit of measurement, which allows for all sorts of experiments and all sorts of measurements, and it allows for a better frame of reference for a human to make sense of things. In this money economy, all goods are priced in terms of bread, and bread is priced in terms of all goods. As bread is the medium of exchange, we can say that the purchasing power of a slice of bread is half a pound of butter, 2 cups of berries, 4 eggs, etc. Consequently, it is much easier for everyone in society to determine whether something is worth it. Another way to say this is that the opportunity cost of buying 2 cups of berries for a slice of bread is the value of whatever else one can buy for that slice of bread. So yeah, this is the statement on opportunity cost. Everybody understands it. Every human understands it. That when you're buying A, you are not buying B. So the opportunity cost of buying 2 cups of berries for a slice of bread is the value of whatever else one can buy for that slice of bread. So what the value of 2 cups of berries is directly comparable to half a pound of butter, 4 eggs, because you're using the same slice of bread to get it. Obviously, we would choose to buy whatever available good we expect will provide us with the greatest satisfaction, as everybody strives for value and thanks to money can properly compare prices. Our actions produce implicit bidding for the goods that have been produced. Our willingness and ability to buy a good at a certain price constitutes our demand. Guys, I'll just take one pause and just get some feedback on. So these ideas, I mean, to all of us here is nothing new. I'll just check who are. So in case you guys feel that, hey Priyanka, I noticed that you joined now. I don't think you were at the beginning. So yeah, just to get some feedback. So Priyanka, I think you are joining us for the first time, and Athar and Jatin. I don't know, Jatin, if you listen to our session on Wednesdays, at least. So any feedback? Because are you from Priyanka and Athar especially? Are you able to understand or get some value, etc.? Priyanka, in case you're speaking, I can't listen, but it's fine if you. Yeah, Athar, go ahead.
Getting like too much theoretical is saying um,
Sorry, I didn't catch
we
that.
can provide more examples maybe, but like related to Bitcoin more, if for
Right.
understanding.
Okay. Okay. Makes sense. All right. So right. So yeah, these concepts are, I mean, pretty intuitive and layman friendly, but I'll try to contextualize them in the context of Bitcoin more. So I was here. The highest bidder for a good will receive it first and will not have to do without. Those who bid less money for the good will be served later until the sellers no longer think the bread offered is worth it. The more people value a good, the higher its market price, and the more of the good is for sale, the lower its market price. So so demand again, like value, is defined in a term of subjective understanding that it's the willingness and ability to buy a good at a certain price, which is not a number, right? So something which is offered at 10 rupees in the market, you could still buy it for 100 rupees if you love it too much, and for whatever reason you are willing to offer that to the person who is offering it for 10 rupees. So there is no mathematical formula for arriving at what demand is in the market. And so if you guys are aware about when there's inflation and Federal Reserve says that we curb inflation by increasing interest rates, they do it by demand, what's called demand destruction, which is an insane idea because there is no one number, and demand destruction, if you understand it very intuitively, it means that they are forcing us to not get what we want, right? So they are forcing people to not be able to purchase and use their money in ways that they wanted to. So right. So yeah, just to give some macro background, if somebody has questions about this, please do ask, because I've been learning about this. So sometimes I might not be able to explain the full context. But yeah, so yeah, these are again economic ideas, and these apply to economy and of course Bitcoin, because just to allude to the point of Athar, that we have discussed this in the context that Bitcoin is becoming money. So Bitcoin currently is like a good in the economy, at least according to Austin economics. It's not money, because money by definition is the most commonly accepted medium of exchange, and Bitcoin currently is not, right? You cannot use Bitcoin to buy most of the services in the economy. So
Audible,
how
Sriyan.
Bitcoin? Sorry.
You weren't audible for the past 10, 15 to 20 seconds. Your voice was breaking
Oh,
consistently.
oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Is it better now?
Should be at your end,
Yeah,
Faisal. It
well,
was clear at my end.
are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, Sriyan. Okay, fine. All right.
Okay. But yeah, is it audible now, Fazil?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay, okay. But yeah, so Athar, I think alluding to your point that Bitcoin currently is in a very interesting place, that Bitcoiners, of course, understand its money, because we are not, most people who call themselves Bitcoiners at least, they are not just stacking sats because they love the memes, but they're doing it because they realize that 20 years, 30 years, it's going to become money. And the game theory allows you to benefit from that as soon as you adopt it. So in that sense, Bitcoin is money to a lot of people, and in a lot of definition, that does make sense. But in the definition of Austrian economics, money is the most saleable good, or the commonly accepted medium of exchange. So Bitcoin is not. So Bitcoin is a good in the economy according to that definition, and people value that for their own subjective reasons, and they express that through the price by bidding for that Bitcoin, right? So it comes here that the highest bidder for a good will receive it first and will not have to do without. So this means that the highest bidder for Bitcoin will receive the Bitcoin first, right? So it's that whenever a miner or an exchange has to bid for Bitcoin, whenever they produce a Bitcoin or when they have a Bitcoin in their inventory, the highest bidder in the economy will get it first, right? This is at least the trend that has always been true. And Yeah, and they will not have to do without because they have access to that Bitcoin because they're the highest bidder in the economy. Those who bid less for the good will be served later until the sellers no longer think the bread offered is worth it. So again, one idea is through the fee market of Bitcoin as well. That Bitcoin blocks is another scarce resource, and transaction fee is a good metric for understanding bidding because every Bitcoin transaction is bidding for that scarce block space, and whoever is the highest bidder, whoever pays the highest transaction fee, will get access to the next Bitcoin block the first, and those who bid less will be served later. They will be served in the next blocks until the sellers, which are the miners or the block producers, no longer think the transaction fee is worth it. The more people value a good, the higher its market price, and the more of the good is for sale, the lower its market price. Yep. So yeah, the fee market is a good study to understand that. So I have been. I think it's common knowledge that on especially on weekends, Bitcoin transaction fee really goes down, and a lot of people say the reason for that is that U.S. people in U.S. are the biggest adopters of Bitcoin, and they're usually out and partying or going on vacations or spending time with their friends and family on Saturday and Sunday, and they're forced to use fiat currencies because most people are still not accepting Bitcoin. So a lot of Bitcoiners who are changing the fee metric on the Bitcoin blockchain are not able to make an influence because on the weekend they are forced to engage in a way in fiat transactions. So yeah, fee market is a perfect reflection of how demand and prices work. Similarly, because our buying and selling efforts are uncoupled, we can produce what will get us the most money in return. We now can expend our labor where we have greater skill and expertise and where we can get the highest payment in money. What this means is that to benefit ourselves, higher payment, we choose to contribute to the economy in the way that consumers value most highly. In a market setting, the purchasing power that we are offered in return for our services tend to be proportionate to the value we contribute to the market in money prices. So yeah, most people, naive and intelligent people, honestly understand this intuitively that the more value you offer to the economy or to other individuals, the higher will be your payment. And I mean, it's the tragedy of the modern economy that most people are not realizing it, or at least they don't see it in those terms that they are required to produce the most value. It's a lot of the time it's not the people who are producing the most value are also receiving the higher compensation, and that's because of the fiat socializing losses in government, all the government branches. As a result, the free market provides those who contribute most value in production with the most purchasing power, which means they in turn also have a greater ability to satisfy their own wants by buying their preferred goods or services. Purchasing power and therefore consumption power, the extent to which people are able to satisfy their wants through goods, is consequently a reflection of one's contribution to the economy as a producer. Simply put, what we supply constitutes our ability to demand. So this is that feedback loop of the economy that as we produce more valued goods and services for the economy, we are able to receive higher compensation in form of money. And because we have higher compensation of money, we have access to greater goods and services. So it's a direct incentive of the free market to produce the most value in the economy, and it's a reflection. Whoever is making more money is adding more value to the economy. Period, because they're clearly doing something that people are badly willing to give them money for. So this differs from how the current economy operates because it's not a free market. But yeah, this is the theory that free market, how it allows for a better world or a feedback loop of rewarding the most valuable and the most producing individuals and enterprises and companies. Yeah, it's because of this phenomena. And yeah, just to allude on one point, that a lot of people confuse this with confuse capitalism with the problem of the fiat monetary system, because capitalism, in its understanding, is producing, in its pure understanding, it's production of capital goods, which can never be a bad thing, right? Because it's only because of producing capital goods you are able to produce better quality of life. You're able to have more nice things in a way, and yeah, it's the tragedy that most people blame capitalism for the problems of the world. Fiat currency and price inflation. We have about 5 minutes. We will end this chapter today. I'll try to read through this. No, this is This might just take time, but yeah, I'll just try to read through this, and we'll try to finish it before 9. We'll take a few minutes to have a discussion or any questions or thoughts. Yeah, let's finish this chapter today. Fiat currency and price inflation. The discussion above explained the economic concept of money as commodity money. Historically speaking, different things were money in different societies: rocks, seashells, cattle, etc. In Europe and beyond, gold and silver emerged as universal international money. Yeah, I asked somebody today, by the way, so I'll ask you this guys later, that why do you think silver, even when there's gold, is still a money? I mean, why do we want multiple precious metals when we have one amazing precious metal? We'll come to that. The paper money we use today is an evolution of previous precious metal coins and banking. The process is as follows. Banks sell space in their vaults for safekeeping of people's money. Money is fungible, meaning it does not matter if you get the same gold or silver coin back from the bank. So banks can keep all customers' coins in the same vault and issue receipts for the number of coins each customer has on deposit. As those receipts are redeemable in coins, people can use them in exchange directly instead of having to take them to the bank first. So I'll just quickly explain this, that the original idea of bank, and even when you understand it conceptually, there's nothing wrong with banks. The idea of Bitcoin is to become your own bank or to debank the whole world. But when you understand fundamentally, banking is not a bad idea. The idea was very simple always, that you provide some space to hold, which is called a vault, for safekeeping of people's money, and you charge a certain fee for that. And what happened over time is, because money is fungible, that one gold coin is one gold coin, whichever gold coin, I mean, with however you source your gold. So people and banks started using receipts as money, because that receipt represented the gold that the bank is custodying for you. And this led to the problem of fractional reserve banking. I think we'll come to this in the later part of the chapter. But if anybody has any questions, anything that I'm quickly going over, or anything that you want to understand deeply, please feel free.
Saifuddin tells that, Bitcoin's idea is not to unbank, it's to uncentral bank.
Right. Yep. Yeah. That's the, yeah. Couldn't have put it better. Yeah. So Saifuddin, yeah, is the guy, and yeah, there's the idea of a lot of people worried about how Bitcoin is not scaling, but it has already scaled. Bitcoin has more than 30,000 public nodes, and there is no central bank in Bitcoin, no central server, no authority, and it has already scaled because Bitcoin was already always supposed to solve the problem of central banking. It was not supposed to solve the problem of being the medium of exchange for the world. I mean, it differs from people to people, but there is a lot of value and consensus around how Bitcoin has already solved the problem of central banking. Because even if you have a lot of banks, and banks were never the problem, it was problem of central banking being the lender of last resort. That if you're able to produce purchasing power out of nothing, and you have a legal mandate to do that, then it's slavery. Because now, how do you go down, right? How does the economy hold you accountable anymore? Because everybody else in the economy is held accountable by market forces, but you as the central bank are not. Yep. So yeah, I was here. As those receipts are redeemable in coins, people can use them in exchange directly instead of having to take them to the bank first. Those who end up with the receipt can deposit it with their own bank, which in turn makes a claim on the bank that issued the receipt. So it's not that you're dependent on one bank. Bank can have relationships with other bank. So if you present a receipt that you used you got from one bank to a different bank, that bank can in turn make a claim on the bank that issued the receipt. At regular intervals, the banks clear all their claims by transporting the net gold and silver owed, saving everybody a lot of trouble. So if people here are aware about Richard Nixon and US going off the gold standard, before that the promise by the US government was that they will custody the gold and they will issue, I don't know if it was gold certificate, it was always US dollar paper notes, but those were supposed to represent the gold that the US is custodying. And because it was inefficient to transport gold between central banks of other nations, they started using US dollar as money or as the medium of exchange. And they were supposed to settle the claim by transporting the net gold. But it was in 1971 that Richard Nixon declined that they will never allow gold to be settled for the claims given to them. This practice has a downside. It offers banks an incentive to issue more receipts than there is money in their vault. As receipts are not all redeemed at the same time and money is fungible, this practice can provide banks with unearned purchasing power. If there ever was one paragraph to just sum it all up, yeah, fractional reserve is the idea that you produce more receipts than the money that those receipts are claiming to make, the claiming to own or be a proof of ownership of that money. And it gives the ability to banks to just have unearned purchasing power, which is basically just stealing. In a free banking system, such abuse would arguably be kept at a lower level. A bank would only be able to issue these additional cash receipts as long as the practice is not discovered and the bank is able to maintain its reputation. But as soon as holders of those receipts were not sure if the bank had sufficient money in its vaults, is the bank insolvent? They would act to redeem the receipts. Historically, there are many examples of banks losing their reputations and their customers flocking to withdraw their money, causing a bank run. If the bank has issued more receipts than it can redeem in money, the run bankrupts it. So in a free banking system, this is the important term here, banks will never be a problem because banking, like any other business, even if you're buying coffee, the coffee seller could be using whatever to dilute the quality and thereby make more business because it's cheaper to make coffee for whatever reason. But it's a free market practice. People will eventually find out. The incentive is for the coffee maker to not do that because eventually the people are going to find out and they're never going to use their service again. Similarly, banking, when it does engage in fractional reserve, are bound to get caught. Or I mean, it depends on how they are successfully able to create a reputation, but also on how slowly and fast they do that. But over a long enough time period, they are eventually going to get caught, and they will go down because there is nobody now that will trust them. There will nobody now that will hold their money with them, and there's nobody to bail them out, right? So free banking system is never a problem. A bank's insolvency due to over-issue of paper money can also be discovered in banks' clearing of claims. A clearinghouse establishes the bank's balances and calculates what money should be transported from one bank to another to balance the accounts. Right. So yeah, so a bank's insolvency can be discovered in banks clearing of claims. So whenever two banks are clearing the claims, they are trusting those claims. And if you have a clearing house, which I think Bitcoin white paper mentions as well, that the clearing house is the trusted authority or the one single point of trust that allows banks' balances to be quote unquote verified. That the clearinghouse is responsible for validating which bank has how much balance, and it calculates how much money needs to be transported from one bank to another to balance the accounts. If a bank issues too much paper money, this will be discovered during the clearing of transactions because the other banks have receipts from this bank and demand that it transport real money to them. Right. So if they issue too much paper money, it will be discovered by the free market. And during the clear, the other banks can demand using the receipt from that bank, which to transport real money to them, which has historically been gold, money that it may not have because it's issued more receipts than the gold it has. It might, this is when it gets exposed. So the over issue of paper receipts can be discovered both by customers and by competing banks. The risk of getting caught, which means bankruptcy, is substantial. In modern times, the most monies are national monopoly currencies issued by government's central bank and have no backing, as the receipts in our example did. This turn of events is explained partly as government's attempt to solve the problem of bank runs and partly by its aim to exploit the power of issuing money. As the monopoly issuer of money, the government or central bank can provide itself with purchasing power at no apparent cost. So yeah, this is alluding to the 1971 event of Richard Nixon getting the world out of gold standard. So it was explained even then by the government to solve the problem of bank runs because the US government had issued a lot of paper claims to other countries. And they said that if effectively all of those countries demanded the gold, the US would have never been able to do that. So it solved the problem of bank runs, but any layperson can understand it was always to exploit the power of issuing money. As the monopoly issuer of money, the government can provide itself with purchasing power at no apparent cost. However, as we saw above, we have reached 9.5. Yeah, I'll just just a couple of paragraphs are left, and we'll just close it at that. However, as we saw above, a money's purchasing power is expressed in the relationship between the money and the goods available. As the new money is used to buy goods on the market, prices are bid up beyond where they otherwise would be because there is more money in circulation. When this happens, we see a general but not uniform increase in prices. When new money enters the market, this is price inflation. So we've discussed this in the initial part of the book that it's not a mathematical equation that if you print double the amount of money, the prices will become double. But there is a clear correlation that the more money you bring into the market, there is more money buying up the same goods and services. And because of that, money itself is just a representation of value, or it's used to measure the price of value, and it's not a good that we actually consume. Then it causes other goods and services to be more expensive. And this is what is called price inflation. Fiat currency created by the government's legal monopolization of money tends to be inflationary. It is easier for the government to provide itself with purchasing power through the printing press than to tax people. However, this effect is that the purchasing power of money falls, which makes people comparatively poor and distorts the capital structure, as we saw in chapter 3. This type of money driven distortion wreaks havoc on the economy, as we will see in the next chapter, and ultimately causes the boom bust cycle. So yeah, so if you're not new to Bitcoin, you already know this, of course, and yeah, this is the problem that Bitcoin solved. And if you're around in 2024 into Bitcoin, you're very lucky. But yeah, we'll close this session and let me know if there are any thoughts. I think Priyanka messaged on the chat. Sorry, Faisal, I missed what you said.
No, I did not say anything. I unmuted myself, and there's a lot of noise around.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Priyanka. Good to know that it was comprehensible and relevant. Okay.
No questions or anything to share from my end.
All right. Okay. Thank you for joining.